Hello, and welcome to the JeffreyMusic Tiermaker episode. This episode is for Radiohead. My name's Gordon. I'm here with my brother John.
Hello.
And we're going to run through the ranking from Radiohead studio albums that we created in our original podcast and put them onto our Tiermaker, which has the levels of banger, splendid, decent, nout special, and clanger. So we come at this with slightly differing opinions in Radiohead, which is why our ranking is a little bit all over the place. John, you're very much a Radiohead fan?
Yes, I suppose so. Certainly more than you are, which is not saying a lot, is it, really?
Not really. I do certainly like some of their stuff, just certainly not everything.
Yeah, but as you say, this is one of those ones that it is a lot of this stuff just feels like a bit of a muddy compromise, but it is what it is. So we will try and rank these as best we can.
Yeah, and before we get to that business, you can find articles and links to everything at JeffreyMusic.rocks, because this is normally a podcast, which is why you can't see us, and you can find the podcast as Jeffrey Podcast in the usual places. So we'll kick off with the first album, Pablo Honey, which is 1994. Most people seem to agree this is certainly not their finest moment. I did personally struggle a little bit getting through all this. I did go back to it and found it even harder to listen to. So I'd be ranking it fairly low.
Well, I do definitely agree with it being ranked fairly low. It's quite an average, I suppose, somewhere between shoegaze and Britpop type album of a band that hasn't really found its sound. So I do think it's got some good moments on it. There are some good tracks, but I don't think it's very forgettable. And I think if Radiohead hadn't gone on to such great things, this would very much been a forgotten album of the 90s. On its own, it doesn't stand up at all. So I wouldn't call it a clanger. I would probably put it in Nout Special.
Fair enough. I'm okay with it being in Nout Special. I think it pretty much is a clanger if you ignore Creep, which obviously is not a clanger.
No, well, I mean, obviously Creep was a proper hit single, wasn't it? That actually people liked, that, you know, really helped propel them and got them attention for the next album and stuff. So I don't know. I think there's a few good tracks on there. And there's some good stuff from around this time, you know, like Anyone Play Guitar, Pop Is Dead. There's a few things on this album as well, which I quite liked. So no, I don't think it's a clanger, but I just don't think it's very good. And when we saw them around this time, or just before they released this, they were in that space of being a bit, you know, too cool for school, whilst being quite slipshoddy and quite distant and aloof from the audience. You know what I mean? Sort of very art schooly, take themselves super serious, whilst not actually being that brilliant.
I think they've kind of maintained that air. They've just got better.
Yes, I suppose so, yeah. Well, they've definitely got better, which I suppose leads us to the next album.
Yeah, so that is, let me just check that, year 1995. So just 1 year later, we get The Bends, which is completely the other end of the scale. I think this has to go as a banger.
Oh, completely agree. I mean, the fact that this was only a year or so following Pablo Honey is just incredible, really. It's just such a good album. I mean, it still sounds good. It sounds dated, but every song is just fantastic on it, you know? And it flows brilliantly. Even whatever song you're listening to, I just think, oh, this is my favourite. And the next one comes on and I think, oh, no, this is my favourite.
I totally agree. And I think it does still stand up today. It does sound dated. I think it's just a brilliant album. By far, I think, my favourite.
Yeah, well, that leads us on to the next album, 1997. OK Computer.
Yes, which we ranked above, so it has to be ranked as a banger.
Yes, it has to be ranked as a banger. And I mean, when we did the original podcast, we were kind of slightly in two minds about this. I think you were fairly clear that you preferred the Bends, and I was less clear. But I just feel that OK Computer, when it soars, the high points are so bloody high, and it does feel timeless. This doesn't feel in the slightest bit dated. So although I think it's got a couple of dodgy tracks on it, the obvious two, Fitter, Happier, Electioneering, I also think it's trying to do more things. It's a bit more experimental. And so I don't know, I just on balance felt it just snuck ahead for ambition, for timelessness, for, you know, incredibly high points. Although I still think it's odd that Lucky is on it. It feels like it doesn't quite belong. And then they didn't put Man of War on. They didn't put Lift on, two absolute cracking tracks they had in their back pockets and used to play live, and then they don't put them on.
Yeah, it is something we mentioned at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's madness.
I agree with most of what you said. You know, it doesn't sound dated, and they are trying to be experimental. And that in itself is partly why it's not wholly successful. But, you know, hats off for them for doing that. I think I agree with you. I think they just didn't pick the right tracks, and had they picked a couple of the better tracks, Man of War is an obvious one, definitely, it would have made the album better. I mean, they're both excellent, the Bends, but like you say, it is more consistent.
Well, the Bends is more consistent.
The Bends, yes, sorry, that's what I meant. The Bends is more consistent. OK Computer, because of the experimental nature of it, they are starting to change there, which is fair enough. And most of it's really good. Lucky was done quite a bit before, wasn't it? 'Cause it was done for a charity album, which I think why it kind of sticks out a little bit.
Well, that's why I find that so odd that it's on there, and especially as they had these other really cracking songs in the, they were playing live quite regularly. So I don't understand why you stick on an old one like that. Even if I understand why you might stick on Electioneering and Fitter Happier, because you might think, we're taking, Fitter Happier is a bit more experimental, albeit a failure. Electioneering just isn't good enough, in my opinion. It's not terrible. I just don't think it's good enough. Oddly, I think that's the one that they led with when they did Jules Holland around the time. So it didn't stand out at the time as being particularly clangerish, at least not to them. When I first heard the album, I just thought, no, this isn't good enough. What's this doing on it? It sounds like something that should be on Pablo Honey. Perfectly decent on Pablo Honey, but it didn't belong on OK Computer. But there you go. Nobody's perfect. It's not a perfect album, but it's an absolute cracker. So it's definitely a banger.
Fair enough. So the next one is Kid A, which is 1999, still in the 90s.
So this divided opinion, didn't it?
Very much, yes. Yeah, I didn't like it. Thought it was quite boring.
I think you and a lot of other people, because it was the time when Radiohead were so far above everybody else, not just a cut above, they were just like leagues above everybody else that was kind of in rock-related music, guitar band type music. And they were being talked about as kind of the next U2 stadium rock band. And they just went, nah, we're not having any of that. So they hid behind this kind of impersonal electronic album and got all super experimental, which made some people go, oh, don't want this, don't like this, like you. And made some people go, oh, it's the best thing that's ever happened. It's amazing. It's amazing. And then people like me that go, yeah, there's some nice stuff on it, but I don't love it.
So which category would you have it on before I try and drag it down?
Well, I don't know if it would be splendid or decent, because there are some bits in this that I really don't like. But I think there's some stuff in this just so good, as well, like Morning Bell, such a beautiful song, Idiotech, National Anthem, everything in its right place. I mean, there's some stuff on it which is just really, really good and would stand out on any album, but then it's got stuff that I really don't like. I don't know, it's one of those things where you're supposed to admire it, and therefore it kind of, oh, it's so good, it's, oh, look, Brave, Left Turn. But on the other hand, it's just not that lovable. So I'm sort of tempted with decent as a compromise there. I'm slightly, by the way, I should just say I'm slightly factoring in your opinion when I say that. So you can't drag it down much more or any more.
Yeah. I do think there is like an element of people sort of pretending to like it a bit more than they do.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's that sort of that cool factor, should we call it. I don't, it's not a horrible album, but and there are some nice bits in it, definitely. But it's not one I go back to at all.
No, it's one that I don't want to go back to, but when I do, I actually think, oh God, this is much better than I remember it. It's one of those albums. It's just sort of, you never really fancy it, but then when you actually, like Shortbread, Shortbread, it's like you just think, oh, it's a crap biscuit, not bothered about that. But then when you actually have Shortbread, you think, oh, it's actually quite nice. It's a bit like that, really.
I think I'm sort of wise beyond my years on that front, though, because I know that Shortbread's really delicious and do buy it.
It doesn't appear. Do you buy it? Oh, God, no.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Oh, gosh.
Yeah, of course, it's delicious.
It's not tempting. I suppose for you it is, then, isn't it? Well, this is the difference of opinion. Well, we're not ranking biscuits here, but if we were, I'd be putting Shortbread in Nout Special. It wouldn't be like in a clanger, like where I'd put like a custard cream or a bourbon.
What? Custard cream clanger?
Custard? Yeah, totally.
Fella, pull yourself together.
But does this mean that Kid A is correctly positioned in decent? So roughly equivalent to sort of Shortbread, albeit in a much more controversial way.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's more of a custard cream than Shortbread to me. But yeah.
Well, let's just not go there.
So anyway, before we get back onto the biscuits, let's get onto the next album, Amnesiac, which is 2001. Which I think, was this recorded straight away after, just as a continuation?
I think they were recorded at more or less at the same time, and then the ones that didn't get onto Kid A were then reworked and put onto Amnesiac, including, for example, Morning Bells on both albums, albeit different versions. So it's kind of the inaccessible version of Kid A, sort of.
Which is not selling it greatly.
Well, and then some other stuff that they reworked, Pyramid Song and whatnot. So there's some really good stuff on here, I think, but I do feel it's a bit even harder work than Kid A. So for me, it goes into the sort of now special category. I can't see how I'd ever put this on, really. I might listen to the odd song or two, Knives Out and things. There are some, okay stuff, but it has to go above Pablo Honey, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's got to be now special or decent. I can't remember. I seem to think that I liked it a bit more than Kid A, but it is.
Yeah, you did.
It is sort of negligible. I do think they're very, very similar.
Yeah, but you had some very weird opinions about this, because you also said the next album, Hail to the Thief, felt like a continuation of Amnesiac, whereas it isn't, because it's like a much more guitar-driven, song-driven, quite slightly overlong album.
Yeah, I felt that I could see the sort of the progression from Kid A to Amnesiac into Hail to the Thief. But I get that it is stylistically different and better than those two.
Well, we put it in between those two.
In between them, didn't we?
In between them. But I do think it's decent, because I think as an album, it's a bit overlong. Well, Tom York described it. He said it was rushed and overlong, and they just put too much on it. And he came up with a much better set list, which I think would have bumped it up a bit. A set list, playlist, track order, track list.
Yeah, which we do still have on our Spotify account, if anyone wants to listen to that.
Yeah, which you can see from the website, the JeffreyMusic.rocks website. It links through to that. But it's still got some really good songs on here, though.
Definitely are. I think, for me, Kid A and Amnesiac are sort of quite dull. I know there are some nice bits on it. I'm very generalising here. But this one, I think you do start to see a more return to form. And there are some good songs on this. Definitely is overlong. And I would be trimming it down and changing the track listing. Not exactly as Tom would have done, but Tom's listing is better. Oh, yeah, I think it's much better. As I said, it just makes the album just feel just tighter. It just flows better. But it's funny how often they do things like that, like we're saying about getting the tracks wrong on OK Computer, because they do that later as well, which we're going to get onto in a sec, where you just think, why did you leave these tracks off? What were you thinking? And I know Tom York said there were some tracks that they leave off and they put them on B-sides and things like that. They hide them away on B-sides. Talk show host is an obvious one. And they do it just to be awkward, because they like to make it complicated to find their stuff. And you think, yeah, okay, that's quite fun in a way if you're a collector. It makes it more... Yeah, I quite like that. Gives you more layers. Yeah, yeah. But on the other hand, why wouldn't you want to make an album as good as it could possibly be? And that's the bit where I kind of think you're almost cutting your nose off to spite your face a little bit there. So yeah, I kind of like the idea of it. But on the other hand, make the albums as good as they can be. 2007, we've got In Rainbows, which we both agreed was a Bobby Dazzler. Very good album. Yeah, I think this is it's definitely for me pretty near the top. I think it's an excellent album. Every song on it I really like. Yeah, I think we ranked this third, and I do think that without going into the order of those three, they are the top three albums by far. For me, there's a massive gap before you drop below them. Yeah, I do think they are the top three albums, and I do think In Rainbows is, I don't know, I remember the first time I heard it, I heard 15 Step, and I thought, oh, this is good. And it goes into Body Snatchers, and I thought, oh, this is great. And I think it's Nude next. And some of their slow stuff can feel a bit dreary at times, because Tom York can sound a bit whiny, but it isn't, it's just brilliant. Nude's just a great song. And then Weird Fishes, and it just all seems to flow beautifully, and you've got all of them sort of showing off with all their fancy chord sequences and key changes and all that fancy stuff they do. I just think it's an absolute banger. Even Videotape, which is a song that I would probably dismiss most often, those kind of slightly slow, ploddy numbers that they occasionally come out with. But actually, I don't know, I just really liked it. I don't think I listened to it at the time. This is the one they released as a free download, didn't they, originally? Well, it was a pay what you want, which, okay, you're from Yorkshire, you heard the word free. Yeah. But no, it was a pay what you want, not free. Fair enough. Although 0 was one of the options. Yeah, it was, because I took that. I was too embarrassed to do that. Well, my principle was that I'll download it for free and listen to it, and if I like it, I will buy the CD. Fair enough. Because I have my CDs. So ranking-wise, I'm guessing are you going for banger here? Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think if
to be generous, I think.
I'm not going to argue with you. I think it's, as I say, it's definitely up there.
I don't think it's as clearly a banger as the other two, mainly just because it didn't move the times in the same way as the others did. Those other two just moved music and changed music. Became all art rocky. I don't mean they invented it or anything, but they did just kind of like dismiss Britpop and just change music, and the impact was enormous. By the time you got to In Rainbows, that wasn't true. A great album for Radiohead fans, but it didn't have the same impact on the world. That's why I'm slightly more reticent. I mean, it's in the right place. Leave it there, fella. And let's move to the opposite end of the scale for the King of Limbs.
Yeah, which we ranked bottom, and was a real surprise after this sort of run of 4 albums seemed to be sort of getting better and building up. And then they go and do this, King of Limbs 2010.
Yeah, I think it's a very short album. And I think Johnny Greenwood at the time was getting into dubstep. So he was trying out lots of different ideas around that, around beats and, whatnot, newfangled stuff like that. And sometimes it works really well. There's some beautiful stuff on here. And again, tracks they left off, like Staircase and the Daily Mail. Daily Mail perhaps doesn't fit so well, but Staircase does. And they're really good tracks. So there are some good stuff on here, but there's a lot of really just boring stuff as well. And it's short. It's not an album I'd ever put on. For me, it's a clanger.
I'm not going to argue with that. I really didn't like it.
No. And a lot of people don't. I think, again, you get people that say, it's amazing. And maybe it is for them, but not for me. Didn't work for me.
I mean, whatever, I do find, especially obviously they've got a lot of fans, but with every band, you will find that somebody will say that the most ridiculous album is their favourite. And you just, how can that possibly be?
Yes.
But obviously it is their opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Slightly off topic, but there was a Jeff Tull post, I think it was on their Facebook fan group, and somebody was saying Rock Island was their favourite Tull album.
See, that is inexplicable, isn't it? I mean, it just makes no sense.
Yeah.
It would make sense if you'd only heard Rock Island.
I'm just, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Really? And obviously it is their genuine opinion.
Did we rank that bottom? Or next to bottom?
I think it was in the bottom cluster, but we're
slightly digressing
not
here.
Really technically talking about Radiohead here. So, but,
no.
It just amazed me. But anyway.
So we've got almost to the end. So there's one more, which is actually a decade ago. Almost. 9 years ago, isn't it?
Trying to find it on the list. 2015, yeah.
It's a long time without an album, although they've obviously been doing other stuff. So what do you think of this one?
I struggled to get into it, but I did kind of feel that with work I would get there. That was my sort of opinion on the actual podcast. I can sort of say I did go back to it and I didn't get there, but it is definitely in the sort of top half of their albums, I would say.
This is one that, I mean, it's got a lot of strings in it, and it's again a little bit short, which feels odd because, again, they left off songs like Spectre, which they could have put on there, which I think would have fit perfectly. But I don't know, I really liked this album. I could sort of see why somebody might find it a little bit flat and a little bit uninteresting, because it is quite gentle and very, I don't know, raw and personal. I think Tom York's vocals on here sometimes are just incredible in a very understated way, but I just think there's something so personal about them. This emotionally moved me more than any other album that they've done, but I don't think it's as good as the top 3. But I don't know, I just found this more, maybe it coincided with, difficulties in Tom's personal life, but I don't know, it just felt very emotional to me and very touching. So I kind of really like this album.
I mean, ranking wise, usually when we've got this far into the ranking, we're limited in where we can rank it, but we could actually rank it banger, splendid, or decent.
Yes.
Because we have it ranked 4th in between In Rainbows and Kid A.
Yeah, I think Splendid is okay. I'm happy with that, I think.
I do, yeah, it's not, I don't think it's a banger.
It's not a banger. It's not a banger. No. But it's just got something charming about it and beautiful about it in a way that actually I don't think any of their other albums have. It is bringing something quite different to the table.
Yeah, no, something did get through to me. I didn't quite get there, as I said, with my listening.
Not entirely made of stone.
I could, not entirely. Yeah, as I said, it was getting to me on some level. So I've dropped it in Splendid because that's where the gap was. I think we should probably leave it there.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. So there we go. We've done it.
So just a reminder to go to JeffreyMusic.rocks for all the articles, links and everything to everything we've been doing. And please do all the things you meant to do on YouTube. That's liking and subscribing and things.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
People talk about clicking the bell, don't they? They say click the bell, but I don't know what that does.
I don't know. I don't really do. If you obviously you can comment as well, but keep it nice, please.